Welcome back, guys. My name is Mike Urtaza, and today we're going to talk about how the 49ers can potentially create cap space with potential extensions, restructures, and cuts. We're going to be using a really cool thing that the Athletic released yesterday called Build Your Own Roster, 49ers roster. It was created by David Lombardi and Matt Burrows. It's pretty interactive where you can add in players, you can restructure, you can extend. It's pretty cool. I'm going to put a link in the description if you guys are wanting to do that yourselves. It does require a subscription to the Athletic. It's $1. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not sponsored by them. I actually didn't have a subscription prior to yesterday. I saw this and I was like, okay, I'm going to get it because this is kind of cool. I think it's worth getting to waste my time on because I love building and structuring 49er stuff like this. And so I'm going to share and transition over. Okay, so here we go. If you see currently, 49ers have $205 million in total liability. Their salary cap is at $208 million, and then they had a $1.56 million in carryover, which ends up being $209 million, where they can potentially spend on. Currently, they have $4.29 million in cap room, and here we go. So the first big one is Jimmy Garoppolo. Of course, yes, his salary is the biggest on the roster currently, and he is fully expected to be moved, traded, and with that, you can see if we trade him, we will have dead cap of $1.4 million out of the $26.95 million of his salary, which opens up about $25 million in cap space. And that's pretty much the biggest thing that you can potentially do to create cap space. One of the things why Jimmy Garoppolo will be moved is because of that. Outside of we did trade a bunch of picks to draft Trey Lance, and it's time to move on. But yeah, if you look at team building, the biggest way to have a Super Bowl window open for years is having a quarterback on a cheap deal. So drafting a guy like Trey Lance early on, only, his cap hit's only $7.75 million, but then you add in a potential adding in, backup quarterbacks, and you can see here, there's quarterbacks, there's picks, there's Tom Brady. If you want to try to put him on this roster, or Aaron Rodgers, you can try to see if you can fit that under the cap space, but we'll talk about further on. I'm going to have a actual completed roster at the end of this, so if you stick around, subscribe, we're going to have a lot of fun here with this. But yeah, I'm going to have a full done roster where you can kind of detail and see what we did to build this roster. But all right, next person that we're going to talk about, Deebo Samuel is not necessarily saving money. You extend him, you got to spend more money. So we're not going to worry about that. But George Kittle. So George Kittle, his salary for this season, his cap hit is $16 million. So potentially, if you do restructure, which means that you're going to turn his salary into bonuses, and he's going to get paid those bonuses up front right now. And then that's what benefits him. And on the 49ers then, they're able to move that $6 million. If you see the difference, his salary is 16, and then restructure would create his salary for this season would be $10 million, so create $6 million. It'll be leveled out in the next few years of his contract. So if, let's say he has 2 years left in his deal, if you save $6 million, the $6 million will be broken up to $3 million and applied to the next following years. So it's kind of give and take because you're able to create cap space for today, now, this season, but you're pushing that money down the line and forcing yourself to have higher cap space for George Kittle in 2023, 2024, 2025, however long his contract is set to be. I'm okay with George Kittle's yes and no. Yes, George Kittle is injury prone. You're kind of forcing yourself to potentially, if let's say he has a massive injury, you're kind of creating more dead cap if let's say he retires, he is cut or traded. Those are the things that I hope don't happen, but it's a part of the game, and it's one of the things you do have to worry about with a guy like George Kittle. So yeah, I would expect George Kittle to be restructured, and that they're able to create, some money for this season. The reason being is it's not really that big of a restructure. It's only $6 million. It's not too much of a dead cap, and it allows you to open up some space. The next guy is Armstead, and this is one of the guys I would not restructure. I do understand that he has one of the bigger, Jimmy Garoppolo's move. Eric Armstead has the biggest caps hit this season at $20 million. But the next 2 seasons, I believe next year in 2023, it's $21 million, his cap hit, and then 2024, it's $23 million. So if you restructure and lower his cap hit for this year to $12 million, creating $8 million in cap space, you're moving those $8 million to the next 2 seasons at $4 million apiece. So now his cap hit in 2023 is at $25 million, and then at $27 million for 2024. Those are the one things I don't like about doing this, especially with a guy who has massive cap hit like Eric Armstead. On my end, I would not. I think I would just not do it to him. I would try to figure out other ways to create cap space, and then if you have to at the end, then you can always create cap space with his contract. The next guy is Samson Ebukam. Samson Ebukam had a 2-year deal basically that they signed him to. Last year was a very minimal, I believe it was like $3 million. And then this year his salary ends up being $8.25 million. And I don't think it's worth keeping him at that price. So if you cut or trade him, it would create $6.5 million in cap space with $1.75 million in dead cap. I would personally either trade him, or you could potentially also extend him and create $3.97 million in cap space this season. I don't know what he's going to be looking for on an extension because he is 27. He really pretty much has one more big contract, let's say, if he does produce. So his number that he might be looking for might be something that the 49ers might not want to do. And again, yes, you could just keep him at the $8.25 million that he is currently at. But I personally don't think it's worth it. I know he did come on late in the year and into the playoffs. He was one of the most double-team players in the NFL. I just feel like with the type of way that the 49ers are able to moneyball this defensive line group, that you're able to find production at a lower cost. There's Dante Fowler who just came available. The Falcons cut him. I would assume that he's not going to command too much money. Again, I don't know because we'll see how it plays out. But there's going to be different ways. You can always trade for people. Sorry, my phone is going off of. I apologize for that. But yes, you can always find guys that you can sign in free agency. We saw it last season. The 49ers were able to get Arden Key for a very low cost. You can find guys who need to be developed. And we have one of the best defensive line coaches in Chris Kasarik in the league. And he's able to always create production out of these guys who are, have not produced in the league, have massive potential, and just need to be developed. All right, so the next guy that I want to talk about is Dee Ford. This is more on the side that we're not going to save much money with him, right? So currently his salary cap is at $11.9 million. If you do cut him, you can't cut him till after June 1st, because if you do prior, then you have a massive amount of dead cap. After June 1st, you could save approximately $2.4 million. And I do know that there's been a lot of talk previously about cutting him post June 1st, and it would actually save the 49ers $7 million, but that's not true. He had about $4.6 million in injury guarantees that hit us last month that were due to the restructure he had last season. Of course, he has not been healthy, so he will get those, it'll add on to what he was supposed to get. And, cutting him will only save us $2.4 million. And I would assume he's going to actually make it to training camp, and the 49ers will check to see where he's at $2.4 million. I get it that people want to see him move because he's overpaid, but there's no point to cut him really at this point until, you could always cut him at training camp, right? Now, I'm saying I personally would move on. I just don't think the 49ers will. I think they will kick the tires on him. because they have a sunk cost. They have no really choice but to do so. All right, so the next guy that I want to talk about is Emmanuel Moseley. So you could potentially extend Emmanuel Moseley. He is on his last year of his 2-year deal that he signed last season. He has a cap hit of $6.56 million, and if you potentially extend him, it would potentially create, and I'm saying potentially because the 49ers might, or he might potentially not take this amount, but the 49ers could potentially save $2.7 million. So I would definitely think that that's an option on the table. He has been hurt. Yes, he has. But when he's played, he has been consistent. I'm not sure. I've always preached about not putting money with guys who have had injury concerns. And I definitely think he's not going to cost much money. So the betting odds on that is that he might get extended. I do think one of the things that he spoke about at the end of the season was that he's going to focus on transforming his body so he can stay healthy through the grind of the season, because he knows if he wants to get paid, he has to stay healthy. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see. It's just an option to create money because he does have probably the biggest hit in the secondary right now, outside of Jimmy Ward, who's the next guy I want to talk about. So Jimmy Ward, if you extend him, you could save approximately, I believe it was $4 or $5 million. So his cap hit is 12.94. If you extend him, his cap hit will be at $7.5 million. I definitely think he deserves an extension. He's been one of the best safeties in the league, in my opinion. Yes, he doesn't have the best hands, or he doesn't necessarily get interceptions, but that is literally his only downfall. He is one of the best deep safeties in the league. He can smack the shit out of somebody. He can cover really well. And I love the guy. I think he's our longest tenured 49er currently. And I would personally love to see him retire as a 49er. And taking the whole emotional element out of it, I definitely think it would also benefit the 49ers extending him. So that's something that I fully expect them to do. It just benefits everybody. And we'll see how it goes. But those are different ways that you can extend and make cap space for the 49ers. And let's just roll through really quickly on what that would look like for the 49ers if I, let's say, did what I think will happen. For now, we'll leave off Emmanuel Moseley. Those are really the three things I really think will happen is George Kittle gets restructured, Jimmy Garoppolo gets traded, Jimmy Ward gets an extension. Emmanuel Moseley, I'm not sure if it'll happen, but it's something that's on the table to look for if it does. Dee Ford, if he's not healthy, will get cut at some point after June 1st. Armstead, if you need to create cap space, you can do so. And right there, you have $51 million potentially to work with. But then you got Deebo Samuel needing an extension. But then you need Nick Bosa needing an extension. Then you need to sign a backup quarterback. And if you go get Tyrod Taylor, there goes $7 million. You have $36 million to build a roster. And that's not much money because we have a lot of holes, especially since Laken Tomlinson also needs to be brought back or he needs to be replaced at $9 million. And now you have $27 million to re-sign and potentially bring back. And then you have guys like Azeez Al-Shaair. But yeah, I can go on. Let's go and I'll show you a potential. This is a completed roster here. So I have Jacoby Brissett at $6 million with Trey Lance. Then I did not bring back Mostert. I signed Justin Jackson, who has a connection with Anthony Lynn. I think that makes sense. He's a little bit cheaper than Mostert, and I do know that there's talks that Mostert might potentially be back. We'll see what happens. Again, this is just a projection. This is just for fun. I definitely think the 49ers should continue to draft running backs late or sign undrafted free agents to build this running back core. You could also bring back Jeff Wilson and Hasty for that roles. And then, of course, Deebo Samuel gets extended. Brandon Ayuk stays. Juwan Jennings, of course, he's an exclusive rights free agent, so he's pretty much guaranteed to come back. I'll sign Trent Sherfield back because he had a very nice connection with Trey Lance in preseason. I would draft a receiver in the mid rounds, basically 5th round, 4th round, who has a speed element, who can attack down the field, and that's something that the 49ers will probably focus on. We saw with Travis Benjamin during the 2 games that Trey Lance started that he got a lot of playing time because he was really the only deep speed guy that we had. So it makes sense for them to target that. I don't really expect them to go get somebody early on because we have a lot of holes to field on this offense. George Kittle gets restructured. Charlie Warner, still the number 2, and then a budget veteran tight end. I have a video that if you do the offseason needs that the 49ers had, I did talk about a number 3 tight end, but it just didn't work out. Of course, if you can get Evan Ingram on a cheap deal, then yeah, bring him in. We'll see if that works. Okay, so with the offensive line, I've talked about this being one of the most, the biggest need that the 49ers need to address. There isn't much that they can do here just because of a money standpoint, especially if they bring back Lincoln Tomlinson at $9 million. But you put a lot of money into a lot of assets in the draft to improving the offensive line. I have them drafting a tackle in the 3rd round, and then a center at the end of the 3rd round with that comp pick that we received for Mike McDaniels. And then on defense, I do not have them extending Nick Bosa. I don't know if it makes sense financially right now. Of course, we can always create cap space because extending Nick Bosa, potentially either you have him, I'm not sure if his cap hit would go up this season. It just depends on how they build the contract. We see a lot of times where nothing goes up at this current year. But if it does, it could potentially go up to $6 million, and you would pretty much create that cap space with Eric Armstead's money, restructuring his contract. Again, I would personally wait it out. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you could do it if you really needed to. I have them trading Samson Ebukam and saving $6.5 million with $1.75 million in dead cap. I think that just makes sense. I have them at some point cutting Dee Ford. Kevin Givens brought back. You spend that 2nd round pick that we have at the edge position. I think if you can get a guy at a cheap cost with, drafting the guy in the 2nd round, this is one of the best edge drafts we've had in a few years. So there's going to be guys that you can potentially get who can be molded into, especially if you get a speed edge guy who we really haven't had since Dee Ford can't stay healthy. And of course, if you can get Arden Key at $3.9 million, I bring him back at that cost. I'm not sure how truthful that is, but we'll see how that goes. Jordan Willis is also brought back. He just has done so much for this team at this point that I just think you bring him back regardless. He's going to be a cheap cost. Nothing really much done at the linebacker position. I have them drafting a 7th round pick. Linebacker, he potentially might not even make the team, but I don't think you really put too many assets, even though Dre Greenlaw and Azeez will be free agents next year. I'm assuming one of these guys gets re-signed. And then on the corner position, I have them extending Emmanuel Mosley, his cap hit for this season being $3.86 million with $2.7 million saved. Then I have them going and getting Chris Harris at $5 million. And then Casey Hayward. The problem with me getting Casey Hayward is I think he wouldn't come here if he's not guaranteed to start. But if, let's say, Anthony Lynn, who's had a connection with him, who's been with him with the Chargers, can help bring him in and say, hey, we've had injuries in our secondary. I wouldn't worry. You're going to play. You're going to have a massive impact on this team. I definitely think you need to continue to build and improve that corner position. Also, we could bring back Jason Verrett. I just think if you bring him back, you definitely need to have a plan with your depth. I don't think you can rely on him regardless, starting or as a depth piece for this secondary. Again, I think Ambry Thomas should be allowed to compete to start. I just like he shouldn't just be given the job. I'd bring someone in like Casey Hayward if you possibly can convince him to come. And then of course I would continue to use mid-round draft picks to draft corners. I just don't believe in using first and second round picks at corners because it just takes so long to develop a corner, and it's one of the hardest positions. You can find athletic guys who have traits that you want on defense to develop them and become starting corners. So again, I would hit third, fourth, fifth round on corners, and I just don't see it as a big need because I don't see a third round guy being able to have an impact this season or even a second round guy unless he's coming in to take that nickel spot. I don't think he's gonna beat out Ambry Thomas or Emmanuel Mosley at this point. All right. Lastly, I know this has been a long video, and if you've been here, you're a freaking amazing. Please subscribe. But Jimmy Ward, I have them extending. I think it's a great deal. Jackowski Tart, at $2 million, I bring him in. If he, I let him test free agency. If it doesn't work out, I bring him in. I definitely think we have options, as well as if we don't bring him in, then we bring in a budget safety to compete with Hufanga, and then I have them bringing back Tavares Moore, who there is reports that his contract told over, but I guess there's reports that he is disputing those with the 49ers, and he's trying to say that he is a free agent. So we'll see how that plays out. But lastly, that's how I have it projected, and we have $4.4 million left over, which is probably not realistic because the 49ers need some extra money for potential signings through the season. So, I mean, it does make sense to structure him. I just think it just creates a problem down the road that I would prefer to not have. So with that, what do you guys think? It's going to be fun to see how this works out for the 49ers. It's going to be one of the fun off seasons. Like last off season, I don't know if it was fun. It was more torture because of Mac Jones stuff. But I appreciate it. Subscribe. We're going to have more great content. And thank you for being here with me. Have a good one.